So there I was, sitting in advanced interspecies cooperation class at the Galactic Academy, watching yet another species discover that evolution doesn't care about your ego. The Thoraxians were up this week, all 8 feet of crystalline arrogance, strutting around like they owned the universe. Their representative, some unpronounceable name that sounded like rocks in a blender, was giving us the standard speech about how his people had conquered 3 star systems through superior tactical prowess and unmatched combat instincts. Yeah, right. That's what they all say. You see, every species thinks they're hot stuff when they get accepted to the academy. The Krell with their acid spit, the Vrex with their telepathic mind tricks, the Zephyrins who can literally phase through matter. They all waltz in here thinking they're the apex predator of the galaxy, the ultimate evolutionary success story, the thing that goes bump in other species' nightmares. Then they meet Professor Grimwald's little teaching assistant. "Now, class," Professor Grimwald announced in his perpetually nervous voice, wringing all 4 of his hands together. "As part of your final assessment, each species will demonstrate their ability to establish peaceful contact with our resident Razorclaw." Oh, this was going to be good. I leaned forward in my seat, making sure my recording device was ready. As a Zentorian, I don't have much in the way of natural weapons or defenses, but we do have excellent memory banks and a highly developed sense of irony. Both serve me well during these little demonstrations. The Razorclaw cage dominated the far wall of the classroom, a massive containment unit made from military-grade transparent aluminum and reinforced with enough energy barriers to stop a freight hauler. Inside that technological fortress of terror was something that had been giving students nightmares for the better part of 3 decades. Picture, if you will, the unholy offspring of a saber-toothed tiger and a particularly angry tornado. 6 feet long, covered in obsidian black scales that could deflect plasma fire, with retractable claws that could slice through durasteel like it was tissue paper. Its eyes were the color of fresh blood, and when it opened its mouth you could see 3 rows of teeth that could crush titanium. The Academy kept it as a learning exercise. Supposedly, true interspecies cooperation meant finding common ground with all forms of life, even the ones that wanted to use your spine as a toothpick. Personally, I think the professors just enjoyed watching entitled species get taken down a peg or 12. The Thoraxian stepped forward, crystal skin refracting the overhead lights into prismatic rainbows. Beautiful species, really. Terrible personalities, but beautiful. "My people have tamed creatures far more dangerous than this primitive beast," he declared, his voice ringing like wind chimes in a hurricane. "We shall demonstrate proper dominance techniques." I snorted softly. Dominance techniques. That's what the Gorvok warlord had said last semester, right before the Razorclaw decided to redecorate the classroom with bits of his exoskeleton. The cleanup crew was still finding pieces 3 weeks later. The Thoraxian began his approach, moving with that fluid grace his species was famous for. He extended one crystalline hand toward the cage, projecting what I assume was meant to be an aura of calm authority. The Razorclaw watched him with those blood-red eyes, its massive head tilting slightly to one side. Then it smiled, and when a Razorclaw smiles, showing you all 3 rows of death, you know someone's about to have a very bad day. What happened next was, well, let's just say the Academy's janitorial staff earned their pay that afternoon. The Thoraxian's superior technical prowess lasted exactly 4 seconds before he was scrambling backward, crystal skin cracked in several places, screaming something about unnatural monster beast, things, and inadequate hazard pay. Professor Grimwald sighed, all 4 of his shoulders sagging in defeat. "Class dismissed," he announced wearily. "We'll try again next week with a different volunteer." As we filed out of the classroom, I could hear the Razorclaw settling back into its corner, making that low, rumbling sound that might have been satisfaction. 37 species had attempted the Razorclaw challenge over the years. 37 species had failed spectacularly, adding their own unique flavor of terror to Academy legend. The thing had never been successfully approached, much less tamed. It existed in that cage as a monument to the universe's sense of humor, a living reminder that somewhere out there, evolution had decided to create the perfect killing machine just to keep the rest of us humble. Which made what happened next week all the more interesting. So there I was the following Monday, expecting another routine slaughter when Professor Grimwald walked in with the most unremarkable creature I'd ever seen. And trust me, in a galaxy full of sentient gas clouds and walking crystals, that's saying something. "Class," Grimwald announced, his nervous energy cranked up to 11. "I'd like you to meet our new exchange student from a recently discovered world called Earth. This is Marcus Thompson." I blinked all three of my eyes. This was it? This was humanity's representative to the prestigious Galactic Academy? The thing looked like it had been assembled from spare parts by a particularly uninspired committee. Pale pink skin that looked thinner than parchment, no natural armor whatsoever. Tiny little teeth that couldn't bite through a sandwich, much less an enemy. No claws, no spines, no poison glands, no built-in weapons of any kind. It was like someone had taken the concept of apex predator and built its exact opposite. Marcus waved at us with one of his stubby little appendages. "Hey everyone, super excited to be here. This place is amazing." His voice was cheerful, completely lacking the proper undertones of barely contained violence that marked a respectable species. The other students exchanged glances. Calith, of Rex with enough telepathic power to liquefy brains, looked genuinely confused. "Professor," she projected into all our minds simultaneously, "are you certain this creature is sentient? Its mental patterns are oddly simple." "Hey now," Marcus said, apparently oblivious to the fact that he'd just been intellectually insulted by a species that communicated through thoughts. "I may be new to the whole galactic civilization thing, but I catch on quick. What's that big cage for?" Oh no. Oh no, he was looking directly at the Razorclaw containment unit. Professor Grimwald's nervous energy shifted into overdrive. All four of his hands started twitching. Well, you see, that's our advanced interspecies cooperation exercise. It's really more of an upper-level course challenge, nothing for you to worry about on your first day." But Marcus was already walking over to the cage, hands clasped behind his back, like he was strolling through a particularly pleasant garden. The entire class held its collective breath. Even species that didn't technically breathe seemed to pause their respective biological processes. "Oh, wow," Marcus said, peering through the transparent aluminum like he was looking at a museum exhibit. "What kind of angry hamster is this?" Angry hamster. The Razorclaw, for its part, had gone completely still. Not the relaxed stillness of sleep, but the focused stillness of a predator that's just spotted something interesting. Its blood-red eyes were fixed on Marcus with laser intensity, and I could swear I heard its claws extending with little snick sounds against the cage floor. "Eth," Grimwald said in the carefully controlled voice of someone trying very hard not to panic, "is a Razorclaw. It's an apex predator from the Sanguinebula, responsible for the extinction of at least 14 separate species before we managed to capture this specimen. It has never been successfully tamed, trained, or even safely approached by any known sentient species." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Looks stressed. Probably bored, too, stuck in that cage all day. Poor little guy. Poor little guy. The creature that had turned the Thorgoxians' crystalline confidence into abstract art installation was a poor little guy. "I wouldn't get too close if I were you," warned Breezix, a Krell whose acid spit could dissolve through 6 inches of battle plating. "That thing has killed more students than stellar plague." "Oh, I'm not worried," Marcus said with that same cheerful obliviousness. "I'm good with animals. We had lots of them back home. Dogs, cats, bears, wolves, crocodiles. You name it, somebody probably had one as a pet." Bears, wolves, crocodiles, as pets. I made a mental note to look up Earth in the galactic database and probably recommend immediate quarantine of the entire solar system. The Razorclaw moved closer to the transparent barrier, its massive head now just inches from where Marcus stood. Its eyes never left the human's face. In 30 years of Academy legend, no one had ever gotten the creature to approach the cage wall voluntarily. Usually it stayed in the back corner, plotting elaborate methods of dismembering whoever was stupid enough to get within 10 feet of its prison. "Hey there, buddy," Marcus said softly, apparently addressing 6 feet of weaponized death like it was a household pet. "You look like you could use a friend." The Razorclaw tilted its head, just slightly, but in a room full of xenobiology students who'd studied the creature's behavioral patterns for years, that tiny movement might as well have been a full song and dance routine. "Mr. Thompson," Professor Grimwald said, his voice climbing toward panic, "perhaps we should move on to the standard curriculum introduction." "Sure thing, Professor," Marcus replied, giving the cage one last look. "Nice meeting you, big guy. Maybe I'll see you around." As Marcus walked back to his seat, I could swear the Razorclaw watched him go, not with the calculating gaze of a predator sizing up prey, but with something that looked almost like curiosity. I pulled out my datapad and started a new file. If this human somehow managed to survive his first week, this was going to be a story worth documenting, and if he didn't, Well, at least I'd have front row seats to the most spectacular failure in Academy history. Either way, advanced interspecies cooperation just got a whole lot more interesting. 3 days. That's how long it took for Marcus to completely shatter everything we thought we knew about predator-prey dynamics, interspecies relations, and basic survival instincts. It started innocently enough. Well, as innocently as anything involving a human can start, which in hindsight should have been my first warning sign. I was early to class, reviewing my notes on thoracian bone-setting techniques. Purely academic interest, you understand, when Marcus strolled in carrying what appeared to be half the cafeteria's breakfast selection. The human had managed to acquire pastries from 6 different worlds, 3 kinds of protein bars that could probably survive nuclear winter, and something that looked suspiciously like Earth food. "Morning," he called out cheerfully, apparently to me. "You're Zax, right? The Xantorian with the great note-taking skills?" "Zek," I corrected automatically. "And yes, though I'm not sure how you knew that." "Professor Grimwald mentioned you're the class historian. Figured I should get to know the guy who's documenting all our spectacular failures." Marcus grinned, showing those tiny, inefficient teeth. "Mind if I ask you something about our spiky friend over there?" He gestured toward the razor-claw cage with a pastry. A pastry! Like he was pointing out the location of the water fountain, not the galaxy's most successful student eating machine. "What exactly do you want to know?" I asked, morbid curiosity overriding my sense of self-preservation. "Well, when does it get fed? Because I've been watching, and that thing looks pretty hungry to me." I stared at him. "Marcus, it gets fed once every 3 days. Synthetic protein blocks delivered via automated systems from a safe distance. The feeding schedule is specifically designed to keep it manageable for educational purposes." "That's terrible." Marcus looked genuinely distressed. "No wonder it's so grumpy. How would you feel if someone fed you flavorless protein blocks every 3 days while you sat in a box?" Before I could explain that I'd feel grateful to still have a functioning digestive system, Marcus was walking toward the cage. "With the food, all of it." "Marcus," I said, my voice climbing into what I hoped was still the reasonable range, "what exactly are you planning to do with that?" "Well," he said, pulling out what looked like a strip of actual meat from his collection, "I figure if I'm going to be classmates with this guy for the semester, we should probably get properly introduced." He was going to hand-feed the Razorclaw. The human exchange student, who looked like he'd lose a fight with a strong breeze, was planning to offer food directly to a creature that had turned seasoned warriors into abstract art installations. I should have called for Professor Grimwald. I should have activated the emergency protocols. I should have done literally anything except what I actually did, which was pull out my recording device and make sure I had a good angle. Marcus approached the cage slowly, the meat strip held loosely in his fingers. "Hey there, buddy," he said in that same soft voice he'd used before. "You hungry? I bet you are. I brought you something that actually tastes good for once." The Razorclaw had gone into that predatory stillness again, but this time it moved forward instead of watching from the back corner. It approached the transparent aluminum barrier until its massive head was directly across from Marcus, separated only by military-grade containment technology and what was apparently the human's complete lack of survival instincts. "That's it," Marcus murmured encouragingly. "I'm not going to hurt you. Just want to share some breakfast." Then he did something that should have triggered every emergency alarm in the academy. He reached toward the cage's feeding slot, a tiny aperture designed for automated food delivery that was supposedly too small for the Razorclaw to fit anything dangerous through. The slot that Marcus was currently opening with his bare hands. The Razorclaw could have taken his entire arm off at the shoulder. Its claws were long enough, sharp enough, and fast enough to turn a human appendage into decorative confetti before Marcus could even register pain. Instead, it extended one massive claw, just one, and delicately plucked the meat strip from Marcus's fingers. I actually dropped my recording device. The sound of it hitting the floor seemed to echo through the empty classroom like a gunshot, but neither Marcus nor the Razorclaw seemed to notice. The creature had retreated slightly to examine its gift, sniffing it with the careful attention of a fine dining critic. Then it ate the meat, not in the savage, bone-crushing manner I'd witnessed during its official feeding times, but almost politely, like it was trying not to be rude to its benefactor. "Good boy," Marcus said, his voice warm with approval. "See? Much better than those awful protein blocks, right?" The Razorclaw made a sound I'd never heard before, not the bone-deep growl of anger or the sharp hiss of aggression that had soundtracked so many student nightmares. This was something softer, almost questioning. Marcus reached for another piece of food. "Want to try this one? It's from Kepler 7, supposed to be really good." By the time the first students started arriving for class, Marcus had hand-fed the Razor Claw 6 different items from his breakfast collection. Each exchange was the same. Calm approach, gentle offering, polite acceptance. It was like watching someone feed ducks at a pond, if the ducks were apex predators, and the pond was a maximum security containment facility. Keleth arrived first, took one look at the scene, and projected a telepathic shriek that probably rattled windows 3 sectors away. "What is the soft pink thing doing?" "Having breakfast," Marcus replied cheerfully, offering the Razor Claw what looked like a earth pastry. "Want to join us? I brought plenty." That's when Professor Grimwald arrived, took in the situation, and promptly fainted. All forearms went limp simultaneously, and he hit the floor like a sack of particularly dramatic vegetables. The Razor Claw, meanwhile, was making that soft, questioning sound again, while examining its pastry with obvious appreciation. I looked at my recording device, then at Marcus, then at the unconscious professor, then back at the most dangerous predator in known space, as it carefully savored what appeared to be a chocolate croissant. "Marcus," I said slowly, "I don't think this is standard Academy procedure." "Oh, probably not," he agreed, scratching behind his ear in a gesture that looked remarkably similar to how the Razor Claw had tilted its head. "But he seems to like it, and I've got plenty of food. Besides, everyone deserves a decent breakfast, right?" The Razor Claw rumbled again, and I realized with growing horror that it sounded almost like purring. Over the next week, I watched Marcus Thompson systematically destroy 3 decades of established xenobiology through the radical application of snack foods and casual conversation. It became routine. Marcus would arrive early to class every day, always carrying some new delicacy from the Academy's increasingly bewildered cafeteria staff. The Razor Claw, meanwhile, had taken to positioning itself right by the feeding slot 20 minutes before class started, like some kind of apocalyptically dangerous pet waiting for dinner. "Morning, Spike," Marcus would say cheerfully, and yes, he had named the thing, Spike. The creature that had inspired terror across 17 star systems was now called Spike, like someone's childhood goldfish. "You know," I mentioned to Marcus on day 4, "that creature has a scientific designation, Sanguineus Mortalis. It means bloody death in Old Galactic." "Yeah, but look at him," Marcus said, offering Spike what appeared to be a sandwich. "Does he look like a bloody death to you?" I looked. Spike was currently making soft, chittering sounds while examining the sandwich with the concentrated attention of a food critic. When he bit into it, he was careful not to let any pieces fall, catching crumbs with delicate precision that seemed impossible for claws the size of combat knives. "It's still a deadly predator," I insisted. "Sure, but so was my neighbor's pit bull, and she learned to fetch slippers." Marcus scratched the back of his head. "Everything's dangerous until you figure out what makes it happy." This was the kind of logic that should have gotten him eaten. Instead, Spike had started bringing Marcus gifts. It started small, a shiny piece of metal he'd somehow acquired, pushed carefully through the feeding slot. Then, a few interesting rocks from his cage substrate. By day 6, Spike was presenting Marcus with complex arrangements of his food bowl and water dispenser, like artistic installations designed to show appreciation. Professor Grimwald had taken to drinking heavily before class. "This violates every principle of xenobiological safety protocols," he muttered, watching Marcus teach Spike to respond to hand signals. 30 years of careful behavioral studies, and this human just walks in and makes it obsolete with breakfast pastries. "How is he doing this?" Keleth projected to anyone willing to listen. "I can read the creature's mind, and it's not thinking in any language I recognize, but it's definitely thinking complex thoughts about the human." That was the part that had everyone baffled. Spike hadn't just accepted Marcus. He'd apparently adopted him. The massive predator would track Marcus's movements around the classroom with obvious interest, making those soft chittering sounds whenever the human looked his way. When Marcus was focused on other lessons, Spike would arrange and rearrange his gifts, like he was trying to get attention. "It's pack bonding," declared Dr. Vorthak, a draconian expert in behavioral psychology who'd been called in to observe. "The creature has imprinted on the human as an alpha figure." "That's ridiculous," Professor Grimwald protested. "Razor Claws are solitary hunters. They don't form packs." They don't hand feed from alien students either," Dr. Vorthak pointed out. Yet here we are. The breakthrough moment came on day 7. Marcus arrived to find Spike pacing restlessly in his cage, making agitated sounds that had everyone except Marcus backing toward the exits. "Hey, buddy, what's wrong?" Marcus approached the cage as casually as always. "You seem upset about something." Spike pressed himself against the transparent aluminum and made a sound I'd never heard before, a low, urgent whine that seemed to vibrate through the floor. "Oh," Marcus said, understanding dawning on his face. "Oh, you're lonely, aren't you? Stuck in here all day with no one to talk to." He pulled up a chair and sat down right next to the cage. "Tell you what, big guy, how about I eat lunch here with you today, keep you company for a while?" And that's how advanced interspecies cooperation became advanced Marcus and Spike bonding time. Marcus would sit by the cage for hours, talking about Earth, about his family, about the weather, about anything and everything, while Spike listened with obvious attention. "So we had this dog named Buster," Marcus was saying on day 10, "and he was supposed to be a guard dog, right? But he was terrified of butterflies. Absolutely terrified. One butterfly shows up in the yard, and this 100-pound German Shepherd would hide under the porch whimpering." Spike made a sound that was suspiciously similar to laughter. "I know, right? But the thing is, Buster was still family. Scared of butterflies or not, he was our dog and we loved him." Marcus leaned closer to the cage. "Everyone's got their weird fears, don't they? Even big tough guys like you." That's when I realized what was happening. Marcus wasn't training Spike or dominating him or applying some advanced psychological technique. He was just being friends with him, treating a galaxy-class killing machine like a lonely pet who needed company. And it was working. "This is unprecedented," breathed Dr. Vorthak, frantically taking notes. "The behavioral modifications are remarkable. Look at its posture, its vocalizations, its interaction patterns. This creature is exhibiting signs of genuine affection." "It's not natural," muttered Professor Grimwald. "Apex predators don't form emotional attachments to prey species." "Maybe," I said, surprising myself. "That's because no prey species ever tried treating them like family." Marcus was showing Spike pictures on his datapad now. Images of Earth animals, his hometown, his family. Spike examined each picture with intense concentration, sometimes making soft sounds that seemed almost like questions. "That's my mom's cat, Mr. Whiskers," Marcus was explaining. "He's about your size, but nowhere near as impressive. You'd probably be great friends, though. He likes treats, too." The idea of introducing Mr. Whiskers to a Razorclaw should have been terrifying. Instead, I found myself wondering if Marcus might actually be right. In his hands, the most dangerous predator in the galaxy had become a lonely pet who just wanted someone to share lunch with. "Marcus," I said after class that day, "can I ask you something?" "Sure, Zek, what's up?" "Aren't you even a little bit afraid of him?" Marcus looked back at Spike, who was arranging his latest collection of gifts in what appeared to be a welcome pattern. "Of Spike? Nah. Why would I be afraid of him?" "Because he's a deadly apex predator who could kill you in dozens of creative ways?" "So could my Uncle Jimmy's raccoon, but that doesn't mean I can't be friends with it," Marcus shrugged. "Besides, look at him. Does he look like he wants to hurt anybody?" Spike was currently making soft purring sounds while carefully polishing his water bowl with one massive claw, presumably to make it shinier for tomorrow's gift presentation. "No," I admitted. "No, he really doesn't." The moment of truth came during week 3, when the Academy's board of directors decided they needed to see this impossible phenomenon for themselves. Picture, if you will, 12 of the most distinguished xenobiologists in the galaxy, representing species that had collectively conquered half the known universe, filing into our classroom to witness a human having a tea party with the thing that haunted their nightmares. Director Koloss, a massive Gorvok whose exoskeleton still bore scars from his own encounter with a Razorclaw decades ago, took one look at Spike sitting politely by the cage wall and made a sound like a freight hauler backfiring. "This is impossible," he declared in that booming voice that had once ordered the bombardment of 3 rebellious systems. "Razorclaws don't. They can't. What is it doing with that food bowl?" Spike was currently balancing his water dish on his nose, a trick Marcus had taught him the day before. When he successfully held it for 10 seconds, Marcus produced a treat from his pocket, and Spike made that happy chittering sound that had become his signature response to praise. "Good boy, Spike. That's a new record." Marcus turned to the assembled board with obvious pride. "He's been working on that trick all week. Pretty impressive for such big claws, right?" Director Vexhai, a crystalline Xerian whose species had perfected the art of tactical warfare, leaned forward with obvious disbelief. "Human Marcus Thompson, you are aware that this creature has killed more sentient beings than stellar plague, yes?" "Oh, sure," Marcus nodded cheerfully. Professor Grimwald mentioned that, but people change, you know. Well, I guess Spike's not technically people, but same principle. Everyone deserves a second chance. It's not about second chances. Director Kalosath's voice climbed toward panic. This is a razor claw. They are genetically programmed apex predators. They don't form social bonds. They don't learn tricks. They don't... He gestured helplessly at Spike, who was now showing off by stacking his food pellets into neat pyramids. Director Kalas interrupted Dr. Yilmaz, the Academy's leading expert in comparative psychology. Perhaps we should ask Mr. Thompson to explain his methodology. Clearly, he's achieved something unprecedented here. All eyes turned to Marcus, who suddenly looked uncomfortable with the attention. Methodology? I don't really have a methodology. I just, treated him nice. Treated him nice, Director Vexhai repeated slowly. You approached the most dangerous predator in known space, and treated it nice. Well, yeah. I mean, wouldn't you be grumpy if you were stuck in a cage all day, eating flavorless protein blocks? Poor guy was probably just lonely and hungry for something decent. Marcus scratched behind his ear again. Back home, we had this saying, you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. Your species hunts insects, asked Director Zelthus, Aquarian whose water-based biology allowed for fascinating but largely irrelevant observations. No, it's just an expression. It means being nice to someone works better than being mean to them. Marcus looked around at the assembled board members, clearly puzzled by their confusion. This is pretty basic stuff, right? Dr. Yilmaz cleared her throat. Mr. Thompson, perhaps you could tell us more about how your species interacts with dangerous predators on your homeworld. Well, that's easy. We make friends with them. The silence that followed this statement was so complete I could hear Spike's claws clicking against his food bowl 3 meters away. You make friends with them? Director Kolas repeated in the careful tone of someone trying very hard not to have a mental breakdown. Sure. Dogs used to be wolves, really dangerous wolves that would hunt our ancestors in packs. But instead of just fighting them forever, we figured out how to make friends with them. Fed them, gave them shelter, treated them like family. Now they fetch our slippers and play with our kids. Marcus was warming up to his topic now, gesturing enthusiastically. Same thing with cats. Used to be wild predators, now they knock things off our tables and demand belly rubs. Horses, cows, pigs, you name it. If it can kill us, we've probably figured out how to turn it into a pet, or a friend, or a work partner. But that's insane, whispered Director Vexhai. Apex predators aren't meant to be domesticated. They're meant to be apex predators. Says who? Marcus shrugged. Look at Spike. He's still an apex predator. He's just an apex predator who happens to like treats and belly scratches. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Dr. Yilmaz was frantically taking notes. Mr. Thompson, are you suggesting that your entire species has built its civilization on the principle of befriending dangerous creatures? Well, not just dangerous creatures. We befriend everything. Dangerous things, useful things, pretty things. Things that serve no purpose except we think they're neat. My neighbor back home kept a tarantula named Fred just because he thought spiders were cool. My aunt had a python that she used as a living scarf. My cousin trained ravens to bring her shiny objects in exchange for French fries. French fries? Dr. Yilmaz looked confused. And fried potato slices. Ravens love them, apparently. Point is, humans don't really see other species as threats to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. We see them as potential friends who just haven't been properly introduced yet. Director Cole made that freight hauler sound again. This is the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. Really? I think it's kind of nice. Nice? Director Colossus' voice cracked. You're describing a species that looks at apex predators and thinks, friend! Do you have any idea how unsettling that is? Marcus considered this seriously. I guess I can see how that might be weird if you're not used to it. But think about it from our perspective. We're not the biggest or the strongest or the fastest species out there. We don't have natural armor or weapons or poison or telepathic powers. What we do have is the ability to make friends with things that do have those advantages. He gestured towards Spike, who had apparently grown bored with the conversation and was now attempting to braid his own tail. Like Spike here. Sure, he could probably take apart this entire room in about 30 seconds if he wanted to. But why would he want to? He's got a steady supply of good food, interesting conversation, and someone who appreciates his artistic arrangements. From his perspective, this is a pretty good deal. But what happens when your new friends decide they don't want to be friends anymore? Asked Director Zelthis. Then we try harder, Marcus said simply. We figure out what went wrong and fix it. Maybe they were hungry, or scared, or lonely, or just having a bad day. Most problems between friends can be solved with patience, understanding, and really good snacks. Dr. Yilmaz looked up from her notes. Mr. Thompson, I need to ask this directly. Are you telling us that humanity's survival strategy is essentially aggressive friendship? Marcus thought about this for a moment. I've never heard it put that way before, but yeah, I guess that's pretty accurate. We aggressively friend everything until it stops trying to eat us and starts bringing us cool rocks instead. As if summoned by this description, Spike approached the cage wall carrying his latest gift, a perfectly spherical stone that he'd somehow polished to mirror brightness. He placed it carefully in the feeding slot and made his happy chittering sound. See? Marcus beamed, accepting the gift with obvious delight. Aggressive friendship works every time. The board of directors exchanged looks that ranged from bewildered to terrified to deeply impressed. Director Kalas finally spoke in a voice that sounded like he was questioning everything he'd ever believed about the nature of the universe. Mr. Thompson, exactly how many apex predators has your species successfully befriended? Marcus scratched behind his ear again. Well, let's see. Dogs, cats, horses, cows, pigs, chickens, various birds of prey, several types of large cats, bears, wolves, dolphins, whales, octopi, various reptiles. He started counting on his fingers. Oh, and sharks, can't forget the sharks, and crocodiles, and… Stop. Director Kalas held up one massive claw. Just stop. I think we've heard enough. Did I mention the elephants? They're really smart, and surprisingly gentle once you get to know them. In the background, Spike had started purring again, apparently pleased with Marcus's appreciation of his gift. The sound filled the classroom like a massive, deadly engine of contentment. Director Vexai looked at her fellow board members with the expression of someone who'd just realized they'd been playing a game where they didn't understand the rules. I think, she said slowly, we need to completely revise our understanding of human capabilities. 6 weeks later, I found myself documenting what could only be described as the complete breakdown of Academy social order, and somehow it was the best thing that had ever happened to the place. It started with the walks. Yes, walks. Because apparently after 3 weeks of aggressive friendship, Marcus had convinced the Academy administration that Spike needed exercise. He's been cooped up in that cage for 30 years, Marcus had argued during what became known as the Great Razor-Walking Debate of 2387. No wonder he was cranky. My dog back home would have eaten the mailman by now if I kept him locked up like that. So now, every morning at precisely 800 hours, Marcus Thompson could be seen strolling through the Academy corridors with 6 feet of apex predator trotting beside him like the galaxy's most dangerous golden retriever. They'd rigged up a custom harness, not because Spike needed restraining, but because Academy insurance regulations required appropriate safety measures for ambulatory death machines. The first time I saw them walking down the main corridor, I nearly choked on my breakfast protein cube. Spike was wearing a bright blue harness with little reflective strips, and he appeared to be heel-walking, actually matching pace with Marcus, occasionally looking up at him with what could only be described as adoration. "Morning, Zek," Marcus called out cheerfully as they approached. "Beautiful day for a walk, don't you think?" Spike made his happy chittering sound and dropped something at my feet. I looked down to find a perfectly arranged bouquet of corridor moss, apparently picked just for me. "He's been making friends," Marcus explained, scratching behind Spike's head ridge in a way that would have cost anyone else their arm. "Turns out he's quite the artist. You should see what he did with the hydroponics lab yesterday." I should mention that the hydroponics lab incident had caused 3 evacuations, 2 mental health interventions, and 1 professor to request immediate transfer to a mining station in the Outer Rim. Spike had apparently decided the vegetables needed artistic rearrangement, and had spent 2 hours creating elaborate crop circles, while the staff watched in terror from behind emergency barriers. The patterns were actually quite sophisticated, Dr. Yilmaz had reported later. Complex geometric designs showing clear evidence of aesthetic reasoning. It's remarkable. "He's just expressing himself," Marcus had shrugged. "Back home, my neighbor's pig used to paint. Well, sort of paint. Mostly she just knocked over paint cans and rolled around, but the results were surprisingly pretty." That was the thing about Marcus. Every impossible thing Spike did, Marcus had some casual Earth-based comparison that made it sound completely normal. Spike learned to open doors. Marcus's cat, Mr. Whiskers, could do that too. Spike started recognizing individual students and bringing them personalized gifts. Marcus's childhood dog used to do the same thing with tennis balls and dead squirrels. The gift-giving, I have to say, had become something of a phenomenon. Spike had apparently appointed himself the Academy's unofficial welcome committee, and his presents were unique. Kalith received a collection of perfectly arranged crystals that somehow enhanced her telepathic abilities. Brisix got a set of stones that turned out to be excellent for acid-etching artwork. Even Professor Grimwald received a custom-arranged display of metal fragments that spelled out, "Thank you," in Old Galactic script. How does he even know Old Galactic script? Grimwald had wondered aloud. I showed him some of my textbooks, Marcus replied. He's a quick learner. Really smart, actually. I think he was just bored before. Bored. 30 years of legendary terror, and it turned out the most dangerous predator in known space was just bored. The real turning point came when Director Kalas made his weekly inspection visit and found Spike helping with Professor Vextar's advanced physics demonstration. And by helping, I mean Spike was carefully manipulating gravity field generators with his claws, while Vextar explained quantum mechanics to a classroom full of students who were too fascinated to be terrified. You see, Vextar was saying, the particle behavior changes when observed, and… Yes, Spike, exactly like that. Thank you. Spike had apparently learned to operate complex scientific equipment through a combination of careful observation and what Marcus called natural intelligence. He'd become particularly fond of physics demonstrations, possibly because they reminded him of the artistic arrangements he was always creating. This is unprecedented, Director Kalasa had muttered, watching a razor claw help teach quantum theory to graduate students. Absolutely unprecedented. Oh, this is nothing, Marcus had replied cheerfully. Back home, my friend taught her octopus to solve Rubik's cubes. Spike's way smarter than that octopus. I bet he could learn calculus if someone took the time to teach him. That's when I realized the true horror of the situation. It wasn't that Marcus had tamed Spike. It wasn't even that he'd turned a killing machine into a pet. The real horror was that Marcus was completely serious about treating Spike as an equal, and somehow, it was working. Spike wasn't just domesticated, he was educated, he was socialized, he was, in every way that mattered, a productive member of Academy society who just happened to have enough natural weaponry to level a small city. The final proof came during the semester-end evaluations. Each species was required to demonstrate their mastery of interspecies cooperation through a practical examination. The Thoraxians presented a formal diplomatic protocol. The Krell developed a complex chemical communication system. The Vrex created a telepathic translation matrix. Marcus showed up with Spike, wearing a little graduation cap and carrying a diploma in his mouth. We worked together on a joint project, Marcus explained to the evaluation board. Spike redesigned the Academy's waste management system. Turns out he has a real talent for logistics and efficiency optimization. The new waste management system was, indeed, a work of art. Spike had somehow created a network of tunnels and processing chambers that reduced waste disposal time by 60%, while generating enough compost to supply the entire hydroponics program. It was elegant, efficient, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Mr. Thompson, Director Vexai said slowly, are you telling us that your final project was collaborative engineering with an apex predator? Sure, Spike's really good at seeing spatial relationships and flow dynamics. I handled the paperwork and regulatory compliance. Great team project. Spike made his happy chittering sound and dropped a small metal sculpture at the director's feet. It was a perfect miniature replica of the Academy, complete with tiny working doors and windows. He'd apparently been working on it for weeks. He wanted to show his appreciation for the learning opportunity, Marcus explained. Spike really loves it here, don't you, buddy? Spike purr-rumbled and gently headbutted Marcus's shoulder, careful not to actually hurt him, despite having enough force to punch through battle armor. That's when Director Kalas asked the question that had been haunting everyone for weeks. Mr. Thompson, what exactly are your people planning to do when they discover the rest of the galaxy? Marcus looked genuinely confused by the question. Same thing we always do, I guess. Make friends, learn new things, share what we know, help out where we can. And if some species don't want to be friends, then we try harder, maybe bring better snacks next time. The terrifying simplicity of this answer hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galaxy thought it knew about power, conquest, and survival. Marcus, I said carefully, aren't you worried that some species might see humanity's approach as threatening? Threatening? Marcus looked at Spike, who was currently playing with a ball of compressed stellar matter like it was a cat toy. How is friendship threatening? Because, Director Kalas said slowly, If your species can turn our most dangerous predators into productive citizens through the application of snacks and casual conversation, what does that suggest about your capabilities in general? Marcus considered this seriously. That we're really good at making friends? No, I said, understanding dawning with a mixture of awe and terror. It suggests that humans don't conquer through force or intelligence or technology. You conquer through making conquest irrelevant. We don't conquer anybody, Marcus protested. We just make friends, I finished. With everything, including things that should be impossible to befriend, including things that have never been befriended before, including things that don't even realize they want to be friends until you show them how. Marcus shrugged. Well, yeah, doesn't everyone? The answer, of course, was no. No, everyone did not do that. Everyone else fought or fled or built bigger weapons or developed better defenses. Everyone else saw the universe as a collection of threats and resources to be managed through superior force or cunning. Only humans looked at the galaxy and saw a collection of friends they just hadn't met yet. Mr. Thompson, Director Vexai said finally, I think your species is going to fit in just fine here. Thanks. Oh, and speaking of fitting in, I was wondering, are there any other misunderstood creatures around campus? Spike mentioned something about a basement full of angry tentacle friends that nobody talks to anymore. I thought maybe we could organize a meet and greet. The collective shudder from the evaluation board was almost seismic. The angry tentacle friends were a collection of void kraken that had been sealed in the Academy's sub-basement for the past 50 years, after they'd tried to consume the philosophy department. Perhaps, Director Kalas said weakly, we should start with something smaller, maybe the carnivorous plants in Biology Lab 7. Ooh, I love plants. This is going to be great. As Marcus and Spike headed off to terrorize the botany department through aggressive friendship, I made one final note in my documentation. Personal log, Zek of Zentari, Advanced Interspecies Cooperation Class. Final observation. Humanity has weaponized empathy and the galaxy will never be the same. We're all going to end up as someone's pet, and somehow, we're probably going to like it. In the distance, I could hear Spike's happy chittering as Marcus introduced him to his new plant friends, and the sound of Professor Grimwald reaching for his emergency alcohol supply. Just another day at the Academy, in the age of aggressive human friendship. The universe was about to become a much more interesting place.